Hello to everybody and welcome back to Be Like Christ for our Bible study in Exodus chapter 5 today. Free outline on our website. There's a link down in the description below. Let's jump in. When did the events of Exodus chapter 5 happen? Well, Moses, our main character, was born probably around 1591 BC, and he had to flee from his birthplace of Egypt, and he went to Midian when he was 40 years old, according to Acts chapter 7 and verse 23. According to Exodus chapter 7 and verse 7, Moses was 80 years old when he stood before Pharaoh as God's representative. Our characters in this chapter are similar to the last chapter. We have the Israelites, or the Hebrews. They were a large nation of people. They were the descendants of Jacob, who had his name changed to Israel, and that's why they were called the Israelites. And then Moses. Moses was a Hebrew boy who grew up in the house of Pharaoh, and when he was 40 years old, we mentioned that he had to flee from Egypt because he had committed a crime. He had killed somebody, and it was discovered. So he fled to the land of Midian. But God called him as his representative to go back to Egypt and to free his people Israel from slavery. Next up is Aaron. Aaron is Moses' brother, and God selected Aaron as a helper for Moses when he appeared before Pharaoh. Aaron was going to be the spokesman. And then Pharaoh is our last character. He's the king of Egypt who defied the commands of the Lord to release the Israelites from slavery. Looking down now at our map, the events of this chapter happen in the land of Egypt. The Israelite people lived in a region known as Goshen. Now let's go over an outline of the chapter. The first section, verses 1 through 5, Pharaoh refuses to let the Israelites go. So Moses and Aaron did exactly what God told them to do. They appeared before Pharaoh and they asked him to let the Israelites go into the wilderness to hold a feast in dedicated to the Lord. But Pharaoh just kind of scoffed at this suggestion, and he actually mocked the God of the Hebrews. Pharaoh accused Moses and Aaron of distracting the people from the work that he had given them to do. And that's what led Pharaoh to do what he did in verses 6 through 19, a section that I've titled, No More Straw for the Hebrews. So as a result of Moses' request, Pharaoh told the Israelites that he was no longer going to provide them with the straw that he had been providing them to make the bricks that they were being forced to make. Instead, they were going to have to source their own straw. But Pharaoh said that the daily quota that they had to meet for the amount of bricks that they were making had to remain the same. So now they had to find their straw and continue making the same amount of bricks. Pharaoh says that the Israelites dreamed of going into the wilderness to worship because they didn't have enough work to do. Right? So he wanted to occupy their time. He said, if you've got that much time to think about going into the wilderness and offering sacrifices to your God, you probably have more time on your hands, more free time than is good for you. So now you're going to have to find straw and make the same amount of bricks. The Israelite foreman actually went to Pharaoh and asked him to ease this requirement, but he wouldn't listen to them. And that leads us into our final section, verses 20 through 23. The Hebrews turn on Moses and Aaron. So when the Israelites realized that Pharaoh wasn't going to relent, they got mad at Moses and Aaron for bringing this trouble upon them, and they accused the brothers of souring their relationship with Pharaoh. Having made no progress with the king during his initial conversation, Moses got irritated and he asked God why he had brought him to Egypt in the first place if things weren't going to go as quickly as maybe Moses and the people wanted. So that's where we're going to leave off in Exodus chapter 5. Maybe Moses thought that he was just going to have to ask Pharaoh one time and everything was going to be great and he was going to let the people go, but God had another plan. That brings us then to our application, and we're going to take our application from what we just discussed. Don't despair if the work that you're doing for the Lord hits a dead end. Moses hit a dead end after his first conversation with Pharaoh, but that conversation was just one layer in a multi-layered story that God was planning to write. If you're confident that you're doing God's work, you can rest in the assurance that God will reveal the next steps to you when He is ready, and know that His timing is always the best timing. In the meantime, don't despair or start questioning your work just because things aren't moving as quickly as you would like them to. You may be only in the first act of a 10-act drama like Moses was in Exodus.